I'm obviously not Beezer Moulton, the chair. I'm Elizabeth Haygood, the vice chair. Beezer could not be here today, but we have a quorum, and so we will get started. Great, thank you. Eric, I'll turn it over to you and go over some of the housekeeping.
Thank you, Vice Chair Haygood. As always, the meeting's being streamed live on County's YouTube channel and in compliance with the Freedom of Information Act. Notice of the meeting and agenda were posted and furnished to all news media and persons requesting notification.
Great. Okay. All right. With that, everyone got a copy of the minutes in their packet that was sent out. Do I hear a motion for approval, or are there any changes? Second. All in favor, aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. All right. The minutes are approved as written. Thank you. All right, we're going to now move into the public comment period. We have a number of people who've signed up, and I think we'll go ahead and allow people to speak. Do you want me to go by the list in order? A number of people have signed up who probably may not be speaking but are just here.
Yeah, I would just run through the list.
We'll read it out. Apologies if I mispronounce a name. The first person up is Gregory Saxton.
Good morning. I'm Greg Saxton, the town administrator for the town of Palmetto.
Would you come up? There's a microphone, Mr. Saxton, so we could hear you better. Thank you.
Sorry. Good morning. I'm Gregory Saxton, the town administrator for the town of Albandale. If you don't mind, I would like to just add my comments once our presentation that is presented to you all has been complete, and then if I can come back up just to add just a verbiage or so, if you don't mind.
That's fine.
Great. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. And I will say that just for information purposes, people from the public have 3 minutes each to speak. All right, Bill Wallace.
I'm on the white
We'll wait till your presentation. Okay. How about Robert Causey?
I'm here, but I didn't sign up to speak.
Okay. All right. Andrea Frazier.
I'm here.
But do you want to speak?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Tom O'Rourke
I'm going to speak.
with part of the presentation.
Yeah, I guess at this point you could just let them come up and state their name and address, whoever would like to speak. I'm not sure if it
Yeah,
was
because
marked
it
on
looks
there
like
who
they signed
wanted
in
to
just to
actually
be
comment.
here. So if you want to speak, then go ahead and state your name and address, and then go ahead and speak, and we'll make sure we recognize everyone. Yeah.
Good morning. My name is Jason Crowley, Director of Communities and Transportation with the Coastal Conservation League. I'm here to speak on behalf of the Ondaw Park proposal, and pleased to see that the town is moving forward with their master plan. However, there's a few things I wanted to note. When the Greenbelt program awarded the funds for the passive park, the deed that was recorded limits the use to a passive recreation use for walking, jogging, biking, crabbing, fishing, water recreation, and wildlife nature observation and enjoyment. You'll see during the presentation today that there's several proposed uses that far exceed the strict intentions for a passive park, including camping areas, an amphitheater for events, a disc golf course, an activity center, and a dog park. We hope as you all consider this today that you exclude these uses in order to maintain the preservation and the delicate national forest that surrounds this property. We're pleased to see that the park is moving forward after all these years, but it should be a passive park, not an active park. And we hope to have those things removed. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you. Yes, sir.
I have some handouts, and I was told by Mr. Davis that I
Okay,
approach
sure.
it. We've got 10 copies.
Yes. Can he come pass those out? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you going to speak?
Yes, I am.
We'll pass
The first. And here's the second. I guess take 5 and go either way. Good morning. My name is Gary Freeman. I'm a resident of Bulls Bay Overlook, which is in very, very close proximity to this planned park. And in 2014, we actually had our annual meeting, and Mr. Wallace came and presented, I guess, a concept and a thought that what was going to be developed once the mining operation had concluded. And we were all in so much favor of that because it was, quote unquote, labeled a passive park. 3 years later, or during a 3-year period from 2016 to 2019, we endured heavy and severe mining operations across the street to obviously pay for the park. And to develop the land as far as developing the water, the body of water, and so forth. And then last year, the town actually had a public event at the park to sort of take a survey of who or what type of activities the public would be interested in seeing. The results of that survey, there was also an online survey, and the results of that survey overwhelmingly favored a lot of passive type activities. Number one on the list was restrooms. Now, that's not an activity, but obviously it's something that's important. And if you go down the list of about 25 items, the bottom 4 included primitive camping, RV camping, and cabin type or tent camping, I believe. So I think that says in itself, in a nutshell, that the public was not necessarily interested in the camping type activities. At the council meeting in May, the concept was presented, which I've placed in front of you, of the overall park plan. My subdivision where I live is directly south or to the bottom part of that sheet, and it's not shown on that plan. The concerns that were listed in that meeting were above other items or listings such as the camping, the fact that there's a liability issue, maintenance and upkeep, management, and security. We did not get a really clear understanding as a group of the public and the members in the town of Allendale as to how this was going to be organized and dealt with, and was a major concern and still is a major concern of us. Today, it appears that the town does not have the ability to go forth with this idea yet because it doesn't appear that all of it has been thought out properly. Specifically, how are you going to keep security for a campground? Well, the idea was thrown out that, well, you could put somebody out there full-time in a camper and let them live out there, and they would be the gatekeeper, so to speak. That didn't set too well with us. We're concerned about all the things that could go on with this type of camping activity, especially so close to our neighborhood. The mayor is really concerned about the children, and I propose that the town I'd like for the town to at least entertain other ideas, such as maybe a ball field or something like that. Lastly, entrances, the second page. Our entrance to our community is directly in line or in the middle of those 2 other entrances. We definitely would like to see and ask that the town move their main entrance to the left side, which is where there is currently an entrance and an exit. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you. All right. Anyone else?
Good morning. My name is Sandra Freeman, Gary's husband. Obviously, I live in the same neighborhood. I prepared this small letter and sent it out to our neighbors and have all their signatures attached to it for you. It says, we, the undersigned, are property owners in Bulls Bay Overlook, which is located directly across Door Road from the town of Allendale Park. In the fall of 2014, Bill Wallace, who was then the town administrator, gave a presentation at our annual meeting detailing the plans for the park. Nowhere in these plans was overnight camping mentioned. Not until the fall of 2021 at the Allendale Municipal Park Master Plan Workshop was overnight camping presented as a park activity for consideration. Results from that workshop and an online survey indicated overwhelmingly that the residents of Allendale do not want overnight camping in their park, yet the town government persists in pushing this forward. Not only are they defying the wishes of their constituents, they have not demonstrated any experience or detailed plans on how to implement their conceptual plan. Additionally, there are campgrounds a few miles to the north at Buck Hall and to the south at Mount Pleasant KOA, as well as other overnight camping areas in the National Forest, so we feel there's no need for additional camping. We understand the need for income to develop the passive activities that were promised, but we don't believe that other options have been thoroughly pursued. We understand that there are other Greenbelt properties that have such activities and ask that other options be fully explored before the town's proposal is considered. We as a community, which will be directly affected by these decisions, do not have confidence that the town government is acting in our best interest or the ability to implement such a plan in an effective manner which will not have detrimental effects to the sensitive environment of the area. We all relocated to Bulls Bay Overlook for the rural community life and the beautiful natural environment. We're grateful that the park is a Greenbelt property and respectfully request that it be maintained as such. I also found in the newspaper a couple of days ago that REI is going to open an office or a new store in Mount Pleasant. And huge outdoor company, if you're not familiar with them, they're a national company. And their local team will be also seeking partnerships with outdoor nonprofits to support their efforts in protecting natural places and welcoming more people outside. Over the last 5 years, the co-op has invested nearly $184,000 in South Carolina-based land agencies and nonprofit partners. I just don't think that this has been, this whole process has not been researched enough, that there's not been enough attention really paid to other means to do what they want to do. So, again, we just ask respectfully that these camping and other activities be denied.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak? Yes, ma'am.
I'm the mayor. I want to speak after
During the presentation? Okay. All right. All right, then I think that concludes the public comment portion of the meeting, and we will move into the actual topic of the Jefferson Tract. I do want to just remind everyone of the protocol that the job of the board is to ask questions of the presenters, and that's the town, that's Eric, all those up there, and that we will not enter into debate amongst ourselves about that. We can do that once a motion is made. So that's kind of how we follow every time, and we're going to stick to that this time too. All right, so we will go ahead and begin presentations.
You're welcome to speak there, and I can run through the slides here for you.
Good morning. I'm Julie Hensley. I am on a team with SGA, represented by Bill Eubanks and Tom O'Rourke with BCI. And I'd say between the three of us, we have about over 100 years of recreation planning experience. Saying we're old, but we began this process. It's been a few years now ago. We had to kind of pause it for a while when COVID was at its height, and just to bring you up to speed on the purchase of the park and how it's being used. It was purchased. It's about 290 acres on Door Road. A $5.17 million Greenbelt grant was awarded from Charleston County. And I think as was pointed out earlier, the grant agreement states that passive park uses consisting of and are limited to walking, jogging, biking, crabbing, fishing, water recreation, and wildlife and nature observation and enjoyment was stated in the agreement. Once the large lake, about 50-acre lake, was constructed, a number of buffer and restoration plantings took place. Over 3,000 trees were planted, and those were creating vegetative buffers to the neighboring community and also restoring wetlands on the site. There are about 40 acres of deed-restricted wetlands, freshwater wetlands on the property. And that just gives you an aerial view of pretty much what the lake looks like now. There's a little island for wildlife in the center of it, and it's what I would call probably 90% complete at this point. And you've got great views all around, nice breeze out there, nice big wide open space. The East Coast Greenway runs along the northern edge of the property, adjacent to the Francis Marion National Forest. The segment of the Greenway in Allendale runs from Buck Hall to the Birds of Prey. A little over a mile has been built through the park with grant funding, and another mile or two is currently under construction in the National Forest as a continuation of that. The town of Allendale was selected as the representative community for the state of South Carolina to represent the Gullah Geechee Commission and highlight their efforts, and the town is working with them to plan events related to the Gullah Geechee corridor. The town also spent $150,000 for that first segment of trail, and about $15,000, I believe, for the trailhead improvements there, the kiosk and the benches and the markers for the first segment of trail. Things that have been happening on the property include the Blue Crab Festival. It's a community event that has been going on for about 5 years. Typically, maybe 2,000 people attend. More than that? 30. Okay. Bicycle Across South Carolina is another event that the park has hosted. You can see where they camped on the property and had paddling activities at the end of the race. About 500 participants were involved with that event. And then the Palmetto 200 is another regional event that the site has hosted on 2 different occasions. It's a run from the Midlands down to the Low Country, and the park served as the terminus 2 years. Oktoberfest is a town-sponsored event that provides a safe place for kids to come out and enjoy Halloween. And so, leading up to today, there have been a couple of prior planning efforts. The one that you see on the left is the original concept plan. That was done prior to the purchase. It's a pretty picture that was done very quickly without a lot of knowledge of the site. You can see that the lake is a completely different configuration. You can't see what all the proposed features are. They aren't that different from the features that are included in the plan today, but because the information wasn't there and no input was provided, no public input was provided, this was just a pie-in-the-sky plan that was done quickly to satisfy the grant application. I think they have, some of the shelters are in the wetlands. They just didn't know enough about the site then to plan appropriately. A subsequent master plan was done in 2017, and once again, there was no public input to that process. A few more elements were added to that plan, more shelters, the event area, camping, all those things were showing up at that point. And so the process that we have been through started with a grant that was obtained by the town from the Municipal Association, and a steering committee was formed with representatives of town officials and community members. And we worked with them to create a vision statement. I'll just read it. Allendale Park is a culturally, historically, and ecologically rich park that enhances the local community and quality of life for local residents and visitors alike. The park encourages community participation and offers a safe and natural destination where visitors have the opportunity to learn, enjoy solitude, recreate, and attend family excursions, as well as community and regional events. And we also developed goals for the park. A survey was developed. It was posted online for 30 days and distributed at a public workshop. A conceptual master plan was then developed and presented to the steering committee, and an operation and finance plan was developed. And then the final plan was presented at a public hearing and town council meeting, and town council voted to approve the plan and passed a resolution adopting the master plan. The goals, I won't read all of those, but they speak to managing it and developing it in a sustainable, naturalistic manner, making it safe, making it inviting, a place to gather, providing restrooms, the number one need, all of those things, highlighting cultural and natural opportunities for education and programs. This gives you a snapshot of the survey results. The top ones, as has been stated, were restrooms, trails. I do not have my glasses on. Sorry.
You didn't need glasses 10 years ago.
It's terrible. That's blurry. Okay. A little bit closer. Bird and butterfly gardens, nature, history, education, signage, picnic areas, kayak, canoe, and paddleboard access, multi-use fields. Those are kind of the top 8 or so. The most favored programs included farmers and artisan markets, birding, fishing, history, culture, and nature programs, music events, senior programs, education for school groups, volunteer programs. Maybe you can see the rest. And so here's the plan. There are actually 3 entrances. This is one entrance that would be used, number 14 in the corner here, that can be used if there were events. It leads directly back to the multi-use stage area. This is where the Blue Crab Festival and things like that would be moved. Parking to support the events. This is a platform tent area along the edge of the water here. On the way back there, there's a canoe kayak launch with a small parking area. Francis Marion National Forest here, Door Road is here. And then the forest borders it on this side. This is the East Coast Greenway running along the northern boundary of the site. The second entrance is here, number 16, 14, 16. And this would serve as the trailhead with a parking area where this is where the day visitors would come, an activity center that would house the restrooms, number 9. Oops. I do. Okay, number 9, thank you. I don't know if the battery's died. And then another multi-use lawn area next to it, number 11. Number 12, in the center of the lake, is just a little crabbing dock there. Out in the middle, where the island is a large shelter, event shelter, that would be used for something, maybe like a wedding, a larger group. And then up above are some smaller family-sized shelters that could be used for just a day outing or a family reunion. Number 4 is a little dog park that can be fenced for dogs. The trail network, number 5, includes 5 kilometers of miles, 5 kilometers of trails, and the thought is that could be multi-use hike bike trail. Over on the other side is a disc golf course. A lot of disc golf players came to our public workshop, and there's a nice big open space that could accommodate that use. There could potentially be a third entrance where people just coming to use the disc golf course could park. And then up above the disc golf, number 7, is primitive camping area. Miss anything? So I think there's been some debate about active and passive. Just speaking from, where I've come from, the county parks system, and having worked with the National Park and Recreation Association for many years, our definition of active park always meant ball fields and ball courts, and that sort of use. I think we've kept within the passive definition in this master plan. Have we kept to the word of the agreement? No, we haven't, and so I guess that's where there's some debate. But and before we get into that, we'd like to talk a little bit about the proposed ways of managing the park and trying to make it self-supporting financially. The town has a very limited budget. They will not be able to hire full-time staff, most likely, and they don't have a capital improvements budget. So they're going to have to be creative and try to charge fees to recoup some of their expenses. Tom O'Rourke is going to walk you through those recommendations, and that's all they are at this point. They're recommendations.
Thank you. They are recommendations, and I don't want to speak for the town of Allendale, but I think it's going to be a long, long, long time before we finally see this park totally built out to what it's going to be. The thing that we like is the fact that there was a planning process. There is an approval process through the group that provided the money, which is good. You've all done a great job, but we would just like to make sure that we get some kind of agreement on what the box that's built that we have to live within forever. Because like I said, I think I will be gone before a lot of these things are done. And the reason for that is money. There's just not a lot of money in there. And what we didn't do through the process and what we won't do today is stand up here and tell you how every single thing is going to be managed, because we don't know the answer to that right now. It will take partnering. It will take those things. But I will say that in our program, we recommended that a group of citizens form a kind of like a park board, so that whenever these things come up, we go in front in front of a park board comprised of citizens so that we can make sure that there's proper input to do that within the box that you build. So I'm really here to just answer any questions you may have about the operations right now. But I did want to make sure that you understood, we think this is going to take a while, and we think that with each element that gets brought in, there's going to be a variety of ways in which to manage this property. And I'm here to answer any questions if you have any.
Are there any other kind of, Tom, in general presentation information that we should have before we kind of go in? Because once we start asking questions, one thing will lead to another, and I want to make sure we have.
We're done from our end, right?
Okay, you're done?
Yes.
All right, then
Yes,
why don't
ma'am.
we do this then? Eric, do you want to give you have a presentation to give on this?
I do. I think at this point, if you have questions about
For
the
them?
specific
Okay.
park plan or operations or anything
then
they've
we'll do
presented,
that.
and then I'll get more into the process. If you want to move forward with
Yeah.
amending the grant agreement, then that's my presentation.
Yeah. So just clarifying what you've lifted, may be helpful, Tom, if you kind of do talk a little bit about what those specifics are, like the contractor vendor approach means that you would turn
Yeah.
that over to another.
Well, what we think it starts with a park board. The park board manages. The park board comes up. But a contractor vendor approach pretty much means that Almondale is not going to have a series of employees out there like you may see in parks. We may contract with a paddling vendor to do paddling programs. We may contract with an event manager to do events. Almondale will do the Blue Crab Festival. Almondale will do the events that they want to do. But there could be other festivals that enhance the community that the board may want to go in there. The other thing, and I hate to be this person, but I'm always looking for the money because there isn't any. So events generate revenues. The more revenue we can generate from some of these things through contractors would work. This way, Almondale doesn't have to hire people and pay them. They can hire a vendor or a contractor, work out a contract where Almondale will get 20% of their gross, and that's how we think we'll get this money. There, as you saw in the presentation, there are already events there. There have been bike ride across South Carolina. They love that area, and actually it does a pretty good job for tourism. But we could meet with the bike ride across South Carolina people, enter a contract with them to say, okay, you can come here. What are you going to use? And then work out a way for Almondale to receive money from that. All the things that Julie mentioned on their events that have already taken place have been pretty good. So that's the contractor vendor approach. Overnight accommodation management. Again, I hate to give that one. It was stated that there's the neighboring group does not want to have any campground host that may stay there overnight. That just to comment on that, there some of the most passive camp parks in this state are run by campground hosts. I was just speaking before about a project I'm doing up at Hasty Point Plantation in Georgetown, very protected piece of land. They have 2 campground hosts that are there 24 hours a day. They stay there the whole time and they keep their eyes on it and do a lot of projects. So it's not uncommon to have that type of approach for overnight accommodations. The alternative would be then hire someone to be out there all the time. That's not going to happen. But one thing we do know, this site needs to be managed. It needs to be managed. 24 hours a day, it needs to have management in it. What that management is will be dependent upon the activities that we have. We will use volunteers, and these are the types of program events that we think would work out really well. The Gullah Geechee corridor we're like straight in the middle of that whole corridor, and we're looking forward to being able to host events with the Gullah Geechee Commission and work with them. Family activities. Almondale is a pretty great family place, so we'd like to have a park for them to have their own activities. Fitness, important. We'll have fitness events, community events, summer camps. I don't know if there's a better place to have a summer camp than on that property. There's so much to do and so many different options. And then the culture and ecological education events, because it's a very culturally rich parcel.
Okay. All right. Why don't, say before you open, yeah, we're going to start opening up for questions. Okay, Taylor.
I guess there are two questions. One for you. I think there were other people who said they were speaking as part of the presentation.
There were 2 town officials that wanted to add to the presentation
Okay.
when the consultants are finished.
Okay, that's fine.
And then maybe for the consultant, can you go back to your survey results? How were the questions asked of people? Where they say, what are your top 5 choices, or were they given all these choices and rank them 1 to 15 or whatever the number was? Do you know?
I believe that there was a preference list, and they chose.
They chose
And then-
their top 5 or something like that?
Well, they could have chosen more, correct?
The way the questions were phrased were stated your favor for each activity. And so this is kind of an aggregate result of the ones that were the most favored.
Okay.
So each question had some, somewhat, neutral or not, five different possible answers for each facility or program, and then those were just compiled. It was easier to show it this way because you can see them all.
So if I'm looking at this, so 2.5 would be a neutral stand. Everything above 2.5 would be a positive, and then everything below favorable, not favorable.
Pretty much.
And nowhere in your master plan is there RV parking. It's all tents.
Now, we were told early on that was, and I need to take 100% of the blame for even RV to be mentioned out there. And at my first meeting, we had a discussion about finance. And if you know me, I just say things. And I said at a public meeting, I said, 75 RV sites is $1.5 million a year, as we were talking about money. And then we learned quickly that RVs are not going to be a part of this thing. So that's why it's not up here. There's not going to be any RV public camping on that site.
So can you talk a little bit about that in terms of what that platform availability for camping, what the overnight camping
Yeah.
would look like, and if you have a vendor doing that, what exactly that is?
Sure. I think that's a good question. As you saw in the pictures, there currently has been tent camping. Bike ride across South Carolina, people come and many of them stay there they bring their own tent and they stay, and it's kind of a pretty good culture of the cyclists. Now, there is a section for platform tent camping. The reason, one of the ways that can be done, there actually are companies out there that will come in, build the platform, put up the tent, and actually do the registrations in a partnership arrangement. So the only thing Almadal would have to do is to figure out the management, which is, again, I said this more than once, it's very critical to make sure that this site is managed 24 hours a day. But the platform tent camping is one where people may not have to bring their own tent. There are some kids in the region who haven't had any experience at camping at all, and maybe they don't own a tent. But to have a series of platform tents that are already there that can house more than one person could be that experience to do that. So primitive camping is bring your own tent. There would be a charge. Platform tent camping is for people that do not have a tent. The charge would be a little bit more, and Almadal would not have to pay any of the capital costs to buy tents or build the platforms. That can be done by an outside vendor, and we can split the revenues. No RVs, period.
Okay.
I have a number of questions.
Okay,
Is that
go ahead.
okay? So most of us weren't here when the original application.
Can you speak up into your
Sorry.
microphone?
So most of us weren't here when the original application was filed. So I want to start at the beginning. In what year were the Greenbelt funds awarded to the park? Does anybody know?
Eric, help me, buddy.
2014.
What?
I don't know that offhand, I'm sorry.
2014 sounds right.
That sounds about right, Charlie,
I think it was before that.
with the funds.
I've been on the board for 12 years. And
2009, maybe?
okay, that sounds better. That's what I thought it was. So, so you were awarded these funds for a passive park. In the last 13 years, what have you done to actually bring people to the passive park?
I haven't done anything, but I'm
Can
going to
someone
let
else
somebody who
answer?
has answer your good
Okay.
question. She wants to know what we've done from 2009 till today to bring people to the park.
Well, we showed several pictures in the slide presentation. We've had the Blue Crab Festival there for over 5 years. We have about 2,000 people for each one of the Blue Crab events. We've had the Bike Across South Carolina event, which is something that moves around different places every year. They had over 500 people there for that. We had the Palmetto Relay event. All of those things we showed in the slides are things that attract people. Our East Coast Greenway Trail has been open to the public for 3 years. We don't count the number of people that go on that. Then we've had town events such as the Oktoberfest. We have a food distribution program that we have there. So we have actually done quite a bit. We were very limited in having events there during the construction of the lake. We had heavy equipment out there, so it was not practical during that 5-year period to have people roaming around on the lake site where the equipment and the operation was going on. But, we have done all of those things on a regular basis to attract people to the park.
So I guess you may have misunderstood my question. What did you do to just bring people daily to the passive park for which you were afforded Greenbelt funds?
I'm sorry, I couldn't understand. You say that?
Or
Every day, what are we doing now?
and what have you done for the last 13 years to use the passive part of the park, not just events, to get people in?
Well, as I said, we have the park trail, the Blue East Coast Greenway is open to the public every day, every single day. But until we finished the construction of the lake, we did not actively go out and encourage people to come into the park. That's why we've done this master plan, and that's what we're doing is to decide exactly what facilities we're going to have there before we allow people to just come into the park. The lake is finished, but the roads are not finished. The drainage is not finished. Those things, we can't just let people roam around the park, without taking account that there are activities which are still not available to the public. But the Blue Crab site is available right now to anyone who wants to come and have an event there. And we've had all of these events on the Blue Crab site. We have never turned anyone down who wanted to use our park for an event. There are other events, the town-sponsored fun run for just basically the residents of Allendale. It was in conjunction with MUSC. We had health screening people there. So we have had numerous events there.
Well, I visited the park this weekend, and I have some questions about that. There is no signage for the park whatsoever. I had to ask somebody who was mowing their lawn where the park was, and they said the only time any signage is up is a sign for the Crab Festival. And
That's not true.
I did not see any signs for the park.
Sure.
I think I know where you're going, and I think the questions are good. But the park isn't open.
Right.
There's not signs, because a sign to a park would encourage people to come on that site. That site's not ready. That site's not safe, and the site's not managed. And what the Greenbelt Bank Board has done a pretty good job of, Kathy Ruff and Eric now, is they're not letting us. We have to make sure that we adhere to the guidelines for what we have. So the answer of what we've done to bring people out there, nothing, because we can't. What we hope is that it starts with a master plan. The master plan comes to you. You give us our parameters. Then we go back and create areas that are safe, managed, and that the public can use.
Do you feel that, your plans and your requests have anything to do with the original plan for a passive park?
I'm one opinion. I think this is one of the most passive parks I've seen. I know that we've heard dog park is not a good thing. I don't know if I agree with that. Disc golf appears to be awfully passive. I've actually seen disc golf courses where there are signs on the hole that tell you about the vegetation that is out there. It's almost like an environmental disc golf course where they tell you about the site that you're on. So I don't know. Actually, I'm the opposite. I think we need to figure out ways to bring people to the site instead of keep them off the site. And I think that was probably the intent of the funding of the Greenbelt money to begin with, is finding ways to get people to the site.
So let me follow up with what you're saying, because on the question, because one of my key questions has to do, and I think everybody's here, is really understanding what passive use is. In the grant agreement, and I know Eric will talk about this, there's very specific uses listed, and Julie, you listed those. I think a fundamental question is this consistent with that? You wouldn't be here asking for us to define the box for you if you didn't feel like it was different than the original grant agreement was. And what we want to be real clear about, and my question is what is different? What are you asking for that's not allowed now? And this could be a question that goes straight to Eric for clarification. If you don't have that, that's fair. But there's certain areas you've mentioned that you clearly think are not, or questions you have. And if you could just say which ones you think are the ones you need clarification on that may not comport with the grant agreement as it's written now.
Sure. Yes. So I think,
Basically, there are four things. Camping, we showed on our original plan the word amphitheater. There's been discussion with Eric about what is an amphitheater. We're not building an amphitheater where you have a stage and then you have fixed seating out, beyond the stage. What we're going to do is have a stage with a massive lawn area in front of it. Sometimes when we have the Blue Crab Festival, for example, there will be vendors who will be located there. Other times, like if we had the Gullah Geechee Commission wants to give programs and things there, then it would just be set up so that they would have a stage and then people would stand up or sit in chairs or on blankets or whatever. So amphitheater, which we've changed that wording amphitheater now to just, a stage with a lawn area. The camping, which we think camping is a passive use. Eric mentioned the dog park. I don't know how much more passive you can get than a dog park. There's no buildings there. There's a fence, and that's about it. So those are the primary things, that where there were questions about, and we've had discussions with Eric about, each one of those things. So you ask about, the changes. I think you have to remember when a lot of things have changed since we got the money to build this park. If you go back and look at the original application, it talked about how would this park be managed. The original application said that the town of Allendale was going to seek some kind of a relationship with Charleston County PRC to manage the park. That was cut out by county council when it was approved. So basically that took away any opportunity that we had for money to manage the park, to build the park. We had zero funds. We went to build the lake. We got money from the lake, and as all of you know and have read in the newspaper, we didn't get everything we thought we should, and we're trying to remedy that situation. But now one of the main things that has changed is that we need funds to be able to construct this park, operate this park, and manage this park, make it a secure place, as Tom has mentioned. So those things have changed. A lot of other things have changed. For example, in 2009, how many people in this room ever even heard of disc golf? Disc golf was the number one thing that people said they wanted. And, so things have changed over that time period. We're trying to do things that the community in our surveys and all said they wanted, but we're also, as Tom mentioned, we have to have things that generate income so that we can manage the park, operate the park, and sustain the park.
Did you want to finish your questions?
Yeah. So when you made your application for Greenbelt funds, you did have funding sources for the park. What happened to them?
We did not have any funding to build the park, zero funding to build the park. The money was to buy the land. The land was going to be a 200-lot subdivision, and we bought the park. The subdivision went away. We bought the land, and for 5 or 6 years, we had zero money to do anything. There was no Greenbelt funds to build the park, none. It was simply to purchase the land. And that's not any different than PRC. PRC got a tremendous amount of money from the Greenbelt. What to do parks? What did they do? For the most part, and I think this was a smart thing to do, they went out and bought property and basically land banked the property. There's a 60-acre site right down the road from our park that was purchased by PRC even before we purchased the Jefferson tract. There's nothing that's happened to it because PRC doesn't have the money to do it. They have 1,000 acres in Tibwin. Nothing has been done. So, the money was not to build the park. The money was to purchase the land. And so we have had no money other than what we've gotten, for example, from PRC to build the trail and money, the royalties we got from selling of the dirt. That's all the money we've had to build anything on the site. That's why this master plan reflects the fact that we need to generate income to literally build a park.
Jason.
So on the drawing, 6 labels the East Coast Greenway. So that's constructed and used right now. Who maintains that?
I'm sorry.
East
I wear hearing aids, and it's hard for me to hear.
The East Coast Greenway portion, the
Yes.
existing portion of the East Coast
Yes.
Greenway.
Yes.
Who maintains that?
The town.
Okay. And then in your community engagement in 2022, how many people attended that? How many sessions were there?
How many what now?
How many, were there multiple community engagement sessions? And do you know how many people attended those sessions?
We had a master planning committee meeting that was open to the public. We had several other events. One, town council voted to approve this master plan. It was a public hearing. People could come to that and, make their wishes known. We had multiple meetings with people in the surrounding area. I think it's not correct to say that we never dealt with, for example, the Bulls Bay Overlook subdivision. We built a 2,000-foot-long berm, 35 feet high, that was supposed to only be there for construction. The neighborhood said they would like for it to stay. We left it. The issue came up about the entrance. When this was approved by the Board of Zoning Appeals for the town of Allendale, the neighborhood said, we don't want the entrance where, Eric, if you can pull the master plan up. Do you have the?
Yeah, it was 16 is labeled as the main entrance, and then it was presented as the main
there's
entrance.
an entrance in the middle of the park, but if you move to the left of that, there was a logging road, and that logging road was there from the time the International Paper owned the property. When the BZA approved it, residents of the subdivision came and said, we don't want the entrance there. We want you to move it away from that. We moved it away. We closed the other entrance. They said that they would prefer the major events to be in the rear of the property. So we've done it in the front, basically because that's the only site we could get to without harming, people getting in and out. The new plan shows the event space in the very back. The camping is in the very back of the property. And I did talk with people in the neighborhood about camping many, many years ago. Maybe not at the meeting that was mentioned here, but I had many meetings with the people in the neighborhood about camping and discussions about that. So all of those things have been taken into account over multiple years.
Okay, and then just for everybody's information, in the comprehensive Greenbelt plan, right, which is what this was founded on, it talks about passive green space and active green space. And by definition, the Greenbelt indicates that passive green space, trails, greenways, interpretive parks, and access points for water activities such as fishing, crabbing, boating. Active green spaces are play fields and parks with low environmental impact. So just if you hadn't had a chance to look at this again lately, I look at it all the time, and you could make your own definition of what this plan represents.
Warwick?
Jason, answer your question a little bit more directly. We had one public meeting on site in the rain, and we had about 45 people show up.
Okay.
And we sent it out online, and we had almost 100 people respond online. So we have had, multiple efforts to get input.
Warwick, do you have questions?
Yes. I have poor eyesight, so I couldn't read the small print of the survey and what was most desirable on the participants or the survey. But I gather that to meet the requests or the wishes or whatever you like to call it, the desires, the major desires, you need to have these amendments approved by the GAB. You can't do it under the existing agreement.
Okay, go ahead.
That's a question.
Mr. Jones, that's correct. There are certain items, and I'll go through that process on which of those items that staff feels like would need to be included in a grant agreement amendment to allow some of these new uses.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions before we go into the staff's? So I just want to make sure I understand clarification. This probably goes to you, Tom, or Julie, anybody, but using the grant agreement, the terms of the grant agreement, was it foundational to your development of this plan? We're hearing that this is very different than the general concept plan of the originally presented. I understand why you hadn't done a survey of the land. You don't know exactly where things can go. That's technical. But in general, I'm curious because one of the things that's really important when and Tom, you've mentioned this and you know this from county parks, when we fund a project, there is a commitment that you abide by the terms of the grant agreement, because that's what you applied for. And it may change for different properties. It's not always the same. The integrity of this program depends on us not violating that without a substantial need to do that. It also requires that the applicant, if they are applying for changes, that they have made every good faith effort to comport with the terms of the agreement. So that, to me, having been in this business for a long time, that means I actually have the grant agreement in front of me. It's foundational to the development of the master plan, and that I'm really not going to put things in there that I think are contrary to it unless I have to. Now, I understand the need for money, and this is where it gets really hard because Greenbelt properties are not intended to be used as an asset that then is a revenue producer. I understand the concept of self-supporting concepts using appropriate passive conditions that were in the grant agreement. So what I really want to hear from you all, this is to preface my question, that can you tell me that you use this grant agreement as the foundation to this master plan, and have you done everything you can to honor that?
I believe that it's very, very difficult from a master planning perspective to come up with all the potential uses before you even buy the property, step foot on the property, and more importantly, understand what the public needs and desires are. And this plan will not be the be-all, end-all plan because there are other types of recreation that we haven't even thought of today. we don't know what people want or what people are going to do 20 years from now. So master plans have to be flexible. I think if there could be a more general definition, and, I will say that the grant wording and are limited to is incredibly binding and I think a little bit unusual. I've worked on quite a few conservation easements, and it's more typical to have more general language that speaks to impervious surfaces and the general uses, and not every specific facility and activity and type of use. So I think that there's a need for flexibility. I think that I would be cautious about including 4 more specific things, because in 10 more years, there could be 3 more new specific things that ought to be considered, just for the public good and if they're compatible with the site. I think that, the fees and charges, it's about being sustainable financially, offsetting the expenses of having this park. It's not to call it revenue. It's really just an offset of expenses.
So kind of following up with that as you're doing the planning, and this gets to contextual stuff, you mentioned that County Parks has a site down the road. And what is the use of that anticipated? I'm thinking about those 2 sites and who does what. One being a Greenbelt site that would be that would comport with the terms of this agreement, and County Parks has other abilities to do other things there. And so I really want to that might help us understand the needs of the community and how they're being addressed better.
That's a good question.
That one is a Greenbelt property as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it has terms, its own terms, is what I'm saying.
Right.
So that may allow different uses for us to understand that. We hadn't seen material on that yet.
Right, and unfortunately, no master plan has been developed for that property yet. But
We may remember what some of that grant agreement allows with county parks.
So this, I believe, you said this was 2009, Mr. Simonson, when this was approved. What I've seen as we've gone over the years with these grant agreements, the very early grant agreements basically took the definitions from the master plan for a passive park and placed that into the uses. Now, if they outline specific things in their application or their master plan, then those were added to that line as well. And as we've gone along in time, I've noticed where more activities were, if it were a passive park, it would list all those uses and then additional uses in there. So I wouldn't get too super focused on active versus passive, but what it says it allows this and is limited to this. So I think that's really what we're looking at.
Okay. Yeah, Taylor.
Could I just ask you one more time? You said 4 things that you thought were out of the scope of the original agreement. Can you give me those 4 one
The
more
camping, both platform camping and on-site primitive camping, what we used to call an amphitheater, which now we're not using that term anymore, then a dog park. I guess maybe it was only 3. Is that right, Eric?
Disc golf.
Oh, disc golf?
Disc golf.
I think this would be the appropriate time. With
think
your
so, too.
permission, I will go ahead and go into my slides.
Thank you, Eric.
And if you all still have questions of the town or the consultants, and I know the town officials still want to speak as well, but I think this will provide some clarity. So our ordinance, our primary enabling ordinance 1424, section 5I speaks directly to this situation. And I will read that. It says, interest in land acquired with Greenbelt funds must be managed and maintained in order to perpetuate the conservation, natural, historical, open space, and recreational uses or values for which they were originally acquired. And then this next line is very important. Uses which are adverse to the original purposes for which interest in land were acquired with Greenbelt funds are not permitted without. So it does allow those if you secure a 2/3 vote of the board and approval by county council after a finding of fact that the use is one that is still allowed within the Ordinance 1424 in the Greenbelt program, but it's not specifically in accordance with what they applied for and what the intent of their original application is. So there is a mechanism for you all to grant different uses, and this is it. And so then they had this in one of their slides. We've read this one over and over about what the park uses consist of and are limited to. And so shortly after the town approved their master plan, I did meet with some town officials and the consultants to get more information on the specifics of some of these new uses and new features. And after going through that with them and getting those details, based on my understanding, my recommendation to you all that the stage, the camping, and the dog park are likely adverse uses to a very, very passive nature park, which is what I see the original application as being. I feel that these uses with conditions, limits set on them, we don't want the entire park to become an RV site or a campground, that type of thing. I think certain conditions would still further the original purpose of the ordinance. And then there's a few other activities. As I understand them, disc golf is not necessarily adverse to a nature park, because I was told that the disc golf area is going to go into open fields that are already there. There's going to be no tree removal for the disc golf course, and that is a very passive activity. The activity center, which is a restroom building, I was told there may be an additional indoor meeting space or group event space in there. I don't feel that that's adverse. The events that they're already having out there are not adverse. And if someone wants to rent a picnic shelter or, low impact facility rentals, I feel like those are not adverse, but they are use changes. So any motion, if we do decide to make any changes to the grant agreement, I would request that we go ahead and list these in that line in their grant agreement that talks about what's allowed out at the facility. And then there's a second part of their grant agreement, which hasn't quite come up yet, but part of your operations plan, it sounds like you'd be relying on other entities to help manage the park and the project, whether that be a contractor or another governmental partner, someone like that. But there is a special condition in the grant agreement that says if Charleston County Park and Recreation Commission or any entity other than the town agrees to manage the Jefferson Tract project, then all monies coming from dirt mining or similar activity on the Jefferson Tract are to be returned by the town to the Rural Greenbelt Projects Fund. It's my view and staff's view, I think, that we want this park to be successful. We want it to be open to the public one day. We want it to be managed in a safe and efficient manner that, takes taxpayer funds into account and makes the most of those. So I would recommend making a recommendation to County Council to remove that special condition altogether. I think it gives the town more options to actually get this park open and running and managed in a safe way to the public.
I have a question. What happened to the dirt mining money? Did you receive the money?
You're asking what happened to the
About
proceeds from the dirt mining?
Yeah.
Well, we have used those with some exceptions, like the legal fund, which we've agreed we would pay that back. But the monies from the dirt mining have been used for trying to build facilities on the park. The contract that we had for dirt mining did have some things specifically that needed to be built by the contractor. The contractor built a well. The contractor ran electrical service into the park. Those were things that were required of the contractor. But the money that we got from the park mining operation have basically all been used on site. But the staff had objections to some of the uses, like the legal funds, and we're paying all of those back. Other than that, every penny that's come from dirt mining has been used on the site. And we've used others, as we mentioned in the presentation, $150,000 from PRT, $50,000 from the Charleston County half-cent sales tax. That's what was used to build the trail, East Coast Greenway Trail through the park. And then we've done other things, as was mentioned in there. We've built amenities along the trail and inside the park. So we spent about $200,000 planting trees, building the trail, all of those things that are outside of the Greenbelt money. But every penny that came from the sale of the dirt went to the park in one way or another. And we, as I mentioned, the legal funds, we are agreeing that we will pay those back, and that money will go back into the construction fund and will be used for construction of the park.
Warwick.
Again, a function of my eyesight, but okay, the staff have recommended the adverse uses of stage, camping, dog park. Were these things high on the list of requests or that came out of the survey?
No, they weren't. But I think there are some things you need to consider when you do a survey. For example, disc golf was the number one thing. Why? Because there's a disc golf course at the Seawee Outpost, and they canvassed all their members and asked them to reply that disc golf was what was wanted. I would venture to say that every single person who said disc golf was the number one thing are members of the disc golf family at the Seawee Outpost. I'm pretty sure that's the case. Camping was not high on the list, and if you look at the people who objected, basically they're the people who live across the street in Bulls Bay Overlook, which is understandable. And they've asked for us to have rules and regulations, and as Tom mentioned multiple times, we will have rules and regulations. We've talked to, for example, the National Forest. They have camping at Buck Hall and other places. We will have some similar type rules that we will apply. I've talked to the director of the camping operations in the National Forest. He said they have had virtually no issues. Obviously, there may be one person every now and then, but they have had no big issues. They haven't had the police come out and arrest people for doing things they're not supposed to. We'll have rules and regulations that are very similar to what theirs are. But as Julie mentioned, that's the next step. First, we've got to know what kind of things can we do. Then we will go and as Eric is mentioning up here, on these uses, he says with conditions. We're willing to put conditions on camping and things like that. We fully intend to do that. And that's part of what our board that would be set up would be tasked with developing those in addition to things like how much would we charge people to use the park for different, activities. If we rent kayaks, how much would we charge people for kayaks, or those kinds of things.
So, Eric, following that up, some line of questions for clarification about these uses. One of the things you always do is look to see, is this the site that needs to be accommodating adverse uses? And this is why I ask about other options in the area. If the county park, and that's a Greenbelt project, could allow some of those uses and is more appropriate for it. You've got, like you mentioned, Buck Hall. You already have camping there. Owendall Green, there's already a place for that kind of music, amphitheater, staging. That doesn't preclude other lower impact uses on this site, but I want to understand what the other options are that could actually take the adverse uses.
Yeah, after being on the PRC site close by, I would say it's certainly not suitable for anything like this. It's a much smaller site with lots of wetlands on it right on the intercoastal waterway.
The PRC site?
Yes, ma'am. Much more difficult access, not a lot of open spaces for parking and large events there.
Okay. So you do have Buck Hall where there is active camping allowed near that now, and you also have the other stage facilities there with Owendall Green. Those are questions, and a dog park could be at other place. You could allow dogs on leash as trails. I mean, this doesn't preclude dogs from being able to be enjoying with their owners. It's just an active dog park, which is different than a lot of trails that allow dogs on a leash and they can run, and you might even allow them just to whatever your rules are. We don't need to get into that. But that's certainly something that is already accommodated. All right, any other questions for either Eric or Town of Allendale?
I'm sorry. The stage that you're talking about really is just a raised platform, the way you described it. It's just a raised platform in the middle of a grassy area, right? Is that what you're thinking?
Some of you may be familiar with the Nexton Park in Somerville. They have an area that's called the Brown Family Park. They have a stage which is probably about the size of what your podium is up here. It's covered and it has facilities, for sound or lights or whatever. That's a picture of it right behind you there. And so it's a very small, stage area. And then it would just be a lawn area in the front. They would have, people could sit in chairs that they brought, blankets, stand up, whatever. There would be no fixed seating, and that would be a flexible space. As I said, when we had the Blue Crab Festival there, for example, there could be vendor tents, set up in that area. But basically that larger picture there is, the concept that we're talking about, not that the stage would be designed exactly like that, but it would be the scale and massing and size is what that is, and the area in front of it would just be a lawn.
But it hasn't been designed.
Right. And Eric, so you think that would be adverse use of the property? Is that what you're saying when you're what the staff
I
thought?
think just unchecked, any size you want out there and any size event, I think, if we were to allow that, then we would probably want to consider some conditions on the size of that stage.
Nora?
The consultant mentioned that there might be other uses that would come up in the future. What Eric said about the amphitheater, whatever, or the stage, I think that we would need to know what these things were going to be.
Just come up in the future? Right. That was my point.
And then-
it seems unreasonable to have to come back and change the grant agreement every time that some new use or activity comes along. That, I think the master plan needs to be flexible and the grant agreement needs to be flexible, more flexible wording.
I think that's a question that, because we talk about all the time, we're trying to have clarity so that we don't have gray areas. We don't want to be inflexible. We want you to be successful, but it takes vigilance, and we have to defend. When you want a low impact area, the tendency is always to go higher impact and allow it. And if we allow too much, then that will undermine the integrity. So it seems like it's onerous, and we don't want to create any more work than is necessary, but we have an obligation to defend the integrity of the program and the terms under which a property was originally protected. And this is a passive area, and you all said low impact. That's an important distinction here. All right, are there any other questions that we have? I have one more I want to make sure I understand. That is, you put up, and it's the next sign, which has to do with allowing vendor contracts and taking out the component of the dirt mining. Is this necessary for them to be able to manage using a vendor contract?
In my opinion, yes.
Okay. So they can't really go along with that management approach unless we were to amend this.
This is a special condition added by county council after it left the conservation bank.
Yeah.
So I would want to make sure we're following that to a T.
Okay. So we could do that in a separate amendment that might be different than these other uses, just to kind of keep things real clear.
Yes, Ms. Vice Chair.
Yeah. Okay. All right. That's right. So, yes.
So can you go back to your adverse and non-adverse uses? How does a dog park, in your definition, why is that adverse in a very large piece of land where you can take your dog out there and let him go in the field, or you can take them to an area that's got a little fence?
For me, the thought was, depends on how large the dog park is. And if we've got 50 dogs all in one spot running and barking and playing, I think that could be adverse to the more nature-based component of the park. Again, these are recommendations for you all. So
So just to clarify that on Jason, kind of one thing to think about is dogs having access to the entire property is less impactful than concentrated in one little area. And this is what we're talking about for a dog park, which is more of an urban type thing, and this is more of a rural open space. Andrew?
I would respectfully disagree, in that allowing dogs all through the woods or through the nature is more impactful, and is less low impact, as they have the ability to disrupt the wildlife. Whereas if you put them in a managed area, you'll have less dog waste because all the clean's there, and they won't be able to, chase any wildlife.
So it's these are the kind of things we may not want to get into that level of detail, but we will have to address whether the park is allowed. And really, you all would determine what the terms of dog access are in the, whether it's leashed or certain areas or their sanctuary areas, that kind of thing. All right, any other questions? Okay.
I'll just one comment. I don't want to speak for Ms. Ruff, but I think in the past when these issues have come up, we've really looked at these uses and said, are these similar impacts to what the original uses are in the plan? And if they are, we've given the folks that manage that park the ability to implement those. I think, again, the three that I listed there have the potential to be adverse if it's just do whatever you want with an amphitheater and a dog park and the camping. I think with some guardrails, then those still could further the plan and not be adverse.
But to be clear, you wouldn't be able to say these are, if you're doing your annual inspection of the property and disc golf was out there, you would say that's a non-conforming use.
So the ones on the bottom, the disc golf, the activity center, events, and facility rentals, if that's all that they were wanting to change, we probably would not be here today. But since we are considering those more adverse uses, I'm requesting that if you do make those changes, we include those in the actual line in the grant agreement to say those uses are allowed as well.
So that's the question right now. Under the current grant agreement, the non-adverse uses would be allowed. So they could still do those things without us changing the grant agreement now. It's only for the top ones, as staff sees it.
The way the 1424 5I reads, it says uses which are adverse to the original purposes for which the interests in the land were required are not permitted without securing. So I read that to say if they're not adverse, then they're permitted.
So really what we're talking about here is making changes. If you'll go back to the list you has non-adverse, that's helpful for us to look at, is the non-adverse are allowed currently under the grant agreement, and this is for dealing with the top ones, the amphitheater, camping, and the dog park. So now, in order for us to discuss, I'll entertain a motion.
Ms. Vice Chair, I know you did have two more.
Yeah, sorry. We do have two more folks who want to speak. Thank you. Yeah, who? Yes, the mayor.
Good evening. I've been listening to everything, and now is the time that I want to get your attention. We've been going through a lot, and we've been trying to satisfy certain groups. Bills Bay Outlook, on your survey, only 5 people was against camping. That was a rainy day. Most of the people in the town of Orndale did not come out because it was very, very, the weather was very bad. But we've tried very hard to please some people. These are not the residents of Orndale. These people came here. But yet, we still try to please them, just like you would try to please us. And that's all we are asking. We are just asking for survival. And that means our children. Yes, I have to look out for the children. I have to look out for the elderly populations as well. We don't have the necessary facilities to move or be mobile all the time because transportation is a problem. So therefore, we would like for you all to just consider taking your mind off how we look and consider what God did to us and God did to you. We are all God's children. And we need your support to help us to sustain. That's all I'm asking. Put yourselves in our shoes. The town is going to survive. And I hope that I caught your attention because God bless the child that has his own. I heard that people are saying that they could go to Mount Pleasant. Buckle don't have facilities, limited facilities for children and adults. And we want the same thing these people want. We want the same thing you want. Please don't neglect us. Thank you.
Who else would like to speak as part of the presentation?
Good morning again. I'm Greg Saxton, the new official town administrator. I've been with the town for about 12 years, was the clerk treasurer, and been in and out of the active part of the whole process of this park. One of the things I want you all to know is our community is growing. Probably within the next 2 or 3 years, we're probably going to double in size because of the growth that's coming from Mount Pleasant into Arwindale. People are coming into the rural area because they want a place to call home. A part of that perspective is the fact that we want to make sure that as Arwindale is growing, people are not coming from Myrtle Beach to Mount Pleasant and don't even know where Arwindale is. We believe that this park is going to be a facility, a place where people can come and stop and actually see the beauty of the rural area that still exists. The question or the comment was made about some of the other facilities that people can go to. Why would we want our kids, our residents to go to Mount Pleasant or go to another facility when they can stay home in their own backyard and enjoy the richness of a park that is theirs? We have people who call the town hall all the time asking from the Boy Scouts, from the Girl Scouts, is there a place where we can come and the Boy Scouts can spend the night and watch the dark sky and watch the stars and get education? Why would we want to send them someplace else when they can come to Arwindale in our own backyard and have that right, have that experience as the Boy Scouts, the Girl Scouts? We've got several churches in our community where our youth don't really have a place to go during the summertime. Our park would be a wonderful place where we talk about contractors, right? Where we can contract with someone to do some type of summer events. I've talked to Mayor Green, I've talked to our former administrator, Bill Wallace, about the idea of us working with our elementary school, where we can talk to them about maybe the possibility of having plants and growing vegetation and growing fruits and stuff, so that way they have an opportunity to learn about vegetation. It's an educational matter, but they also are putting their own investment into our town park. So I understand that there are a lot of concerns, but something that has been said, and I want to restate it again if you don't mind. The last census was 1,500 people that we have in Arwindale. 10 houses does not represent 1,500 people. This community is a community that is inclusive. We are just asking for the opportunity that as we grow, we can grow beautifully. That we can have an opportunity to provide to our residents something that they look forward to. Why would you want to go someplace else for a family reunion when you can have your family reunion and your roots are in Allendale? You can have it at your own park. One of the things that we did not mention just recently, I believe back in March, we had someone to come and approach the town about a fundraiser that they were doing. And their entertainment was somebody who was a Grammy award winning person that came to Allendale and had a concert. They could have went any other place, but they asked if they could use our facility as a place to have a concert for a fundraiser. The question was thrown out about a signage, about there's no signage on about the park. Well, let me abreast you with something. Town council just approved that we do some improvements, and part of those improvements was to get us a gate, a sign that represents that when you drive down Door Road, you will know exactly what 7900 Door Road is, because we are going to be in that process of trying to get a gate, trying to get some type of beautiful sign. We've been talking about branding, things that will represent the town of Allendale. My last point, we spent several years trying to get this park up and coming. We spent time, we spent effort. We're not just going to sit around and once these things start to formulate, waste our investment. I don't believe I have a town council that's just going to waste their investment. So if we've gone to this extent to come before you, and we've gone to this extent to get consultants who've taken their time to help us to create this plan, we're going to make sure that we're going to do what we're supposed to do, because as it was just alluded to, every year we have to have an inspection. Every year someone comes out, and I believe, and Bill, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think that there's ever been a time that they have come out and there's been an issue. We've passed all our inspections because we've made sure that we've done everything that we were supposed to do. So I'm just asking, like everyone else has been before you, that you would consider that our community is growing. And we want to make a stamp that Allendale is here. It's beautiful, it's wonderful, and we're growing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Saxton. All right.
Question
Yes,
of
you
Eric.
can. We're going to do fine.
So the adverse uses, you say these conditions, or we have to put conditions. How would we do that? Is that taken into account the proposed refurbage? Will that control it enough to turn it into a non-adverse?
So I would say we would want to put a limit on the size of the stage, the number of campsites that could be allowed out there, and maybe an overall envelope or acreage for the dog park.
Is that something we would do here, or is that something that you would go and work and then come back to us?
It would be nice to allow them to provide some input on the sizes that they would need for all of that. So if you decided to move forward with some conditions, I would recommend to give us the opportunity to work with them on coming up with something.
Andrew?
Yeah, I was just going to say the same thing. I think we should defer to the consultants who have been working on this site and the needs of the town. And I guess, is that what the condition would be? Because I had a similar question. To Taylor, would it be the condition that they work with staff to come to an agreement or something like that?
I think we would want to get very specific, just like we do. We've been talking about impervious surface limits and things like that. So, I think you would want to look at specific limits that you all would pass. We would come back to you after working with the town and the consultants saying, here's what they can live with, and give you their recommendation on that. And then you all can change it if you feel like it needs to be changed. My intent there was not just to, I just don't think we can say, if you're going to approve camping, just approving camping without any limits on that. I think there need to be limits set.
Okay, I'm sorry, just to follow up. So it's not something that's going to get worked out right now. We could work out the idea of allowing this with further discussion, but it sounds like there needs to be a healthy discussion and a back and forth of, what they would need as far as square footage or areas. Because as they mentioned, the stage isn't designed yet. So, they might want to think about what that looks like, who they might want to accommodate. I just felt like, I guess my point is, I feel like it would be really potentially tough for us to determine the caps or size of these things right now without having, a planning person really tell us why they would need certain items in certain sizes.
Go ahead, Eric. Do you want to answer?
That's how I view it as well. If you all decided today that you did want to entertain these new uses, instead of making a motion to go ahead and send that to county council, I would ask to be able to come back to you with some of the specifics on the conditions.
So just following up with what the following statements from the mayor and Mr. Saxton, I want to make sure we understand as a board what now they can and can't do. They both mentioned the, family access, and we want all the families of Owendale to enjoy this. Kids, summer camps, Boy Scouts with tent camping, those were specific things mentioned, family reunions, low impact fundraiser. They can all do those things now. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So that is not that's not.
And with the camping, I would say for an event, a special group event, but not every night of the week. Someone can book a reservation online.
But the Boy Scouts could go have a, special camp, nice part of a camp retreat. They could use it for that under the current.
I agree with that.
Okay, it's helpful for us to know what is and isn't allowed, because that's really important, because we want the community to use it that way.
I think there's a difference between a commercial campground and a primitive site, group site that's reserved for Boy Scouts and youth groups and things like that.
But also right now, where it says non-adverse use changes, can they do the disc golf and activity center? I mean, they can still, or I'll go with that. We just have to work on those three things. Right? Is that what you're saying?
If we wanted to allow those. I mean, because I think that's the question, is what I'm trying to understand is what is allowed now that they can do, and are those appropriate? So is it all those things, the summer camps, the primitive camping associated with that, family reunions, are allowed under passive recreational use?
Yes.
All right, Nora?
I'd like to add some language that limits the improvements to what is actually in, any agreement we come up with. So if they want to add things in the future, that would have to be addressed again.
Okay, so I will entertain a motion.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the requested amendments from the town of Owendale.
Okay, with restrictions?
Well, I mean, as we have discussed, that there probably needs to be an opportunity for Owendale to work a little bit further with Eric, so we can come back with some specifics. Otherwise, I would recommend inclusion of both the adverse, what have been identified as both the adverse and non-adverse uses, to be added to the grant agreement.
All right, is there a second to that for the purpose of discussion, Andrew? Okay, so this is a time for us to discuss that. And I think one of the key things here that we've talked about is the guidance we need to give in terms of you're following up with them for allowing these uses, whether that is impact level. Eric, maybe you can help guide what might be helpful for you as a tool, so that what they come back with would be, in comporting with what we're consistent with low impact passive use.
I would like to talk with them and make a recommendation to you on the conditions if you were to approve this. So as far as procedure, I'm not sure if you want to take a vote now to approve these, or if you just would prefer to table that when we can come back with those conditions, or I guess you could make a...
Or perhaps the motion is to come back whenever our next meeting is. I mean, the motion could include that, to come back.
Yes, to come back. So not to approve it, but actually to ask you to go work out a very specific policy change, amendment change to the Greenbelt agreement.
It's favorable towards these proposed uses to
honors
be included, with specifics to be worked out and brought back, presented next time for final approval.
So if that's the motion, then it's one to actually ask you to bring that back, and we're not actually passing that right now until we see specifically what those conditions are.
I would recommend that motion, but I think that since she made the motion already to approve, that the second and the original motion would need to be withdrawn.
Okay.
And then the new motion.
Just to clarify.
Okay, well, I'll withdraw it. Okay. And I'll make a whole new motion to that recommend approval that over the next, when are we meeting again? I don't know where
Our next meeting is in September.
Oh, geez. Okay.
So, yeah, so it's really not, just to make sure I'm clear, it's a motion to ask staff to go work with the consultants in the town to come up with a very specific Greenbelt amendment that would allow appropriate use of those adverse uses.
Right, I was just trying to identify the month, but I didn't realize we weren't meeting until September again.
Okay.
But if that be the case, and Allendale is got the summer to work on this, perhaps with the Greenbelt staff, then that would be the motion that to come back at our next meeting with a draft amendment to the grant agreement to include these proposed uses from the town of Allendale and some proposed parameters for, in particular, the adverse uses as shown.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, that's a new motion. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
You are, Ray? Okay. Any discussion? Warwick?
With all that verbiage, I'm not sure I still understand it. But anyhow, okay, my suggestion would be is that you're trying to put a framework there. You're giving an option or a possibility for the town to move ahead one way or other with each of those three categories, stage camping and dog park. Do we have to do that? Could we just say we will consider a stage, a camping dog park, but the town has to come back with a specific proposal for each of them for us to consider? And I also say that because I don't want to think of a blanket approval, because as all of the people from the town have said, we don't have the funds. We don't know when we're going to be able to move and do whatever expansion. So why don't we just look at it on a bit-by-bit basis rather than trying to cover the whole thing at this stage?
It seems to, yeah, I think that's a good point. I think that your motion actually addresses that. It's asking for a very specific, them to come back with very specific conditions on each one of those. So I think that.
Yes,
that,
but not bit by bit.
No. I mean, we would have a very clear yes.
Yes, because I think the town needs that.
Yes. I think they do too. And I think one of the things I would just say about it that's very important is that what you come up with is very much in line with a low impact passive park. So if you're looking for direction in the box, I think that we aren't looking to change the overall intent at all of what this agreement was for in terms of giving the Allendale a community passive park that all citizens can enjoy. So I think the less impact, the better. And if you're trying to come up with those things, let's think of creative ways to make it low impact.
Okay.
Taylor,
I was just going to ask a question of the motion. Are we just looking at the adverse uses? Is that what it's, or are we looking at both A and B, basically?
No, I said to include the non-adverse is just per what Eric is requesting, is the adverse uses are the ones that he's kind of requesting some parameters on and some limitations on.
And so tell me what happens with the lower group there.
They just get added as basically as permitted uses.
Are they going to have to come and show us what those are as well, or?
No, because he already said they would technically be permitted already. He would have let those slide had they not wanted those top three, which he considers to be more impactful.
Okay, so if we vote in favor of your motion, what is the town of Allendale going to have to do? Are they going to be able to build their disc golf if we approve this motion and then just come back for stage camping and dog park? I'm just trying to understand what I'm going to vote for here.
When they come, what I'm thinking is going to happen is when they come back in September, they would have worked over the summer with staff, basically worked up an amendment to the agreement so we can see the verbiage and what it'll do. Right now it says walking, fishing, all this other sort of stuff. It can go ahead and list disc golf, activity center, facility rental, but then it'll also list stage at X size, camping with so many campsites, dog park, so in acreage. So that part will have some specifics. That's my thought.
We
of
would
how it
actually
look.
draft the amendment to bring to you for your review.
But that's how I would think it would look.
Yes, ma'am. So like a not to exceed amount of campsites and things
Right.
like that.
Nora?
I'd like to address the mayor. I heard what you said. I agree with what you said. What I'm worried about is that the park has only been used for events. And I would like us to come up with a plan to get it opened as a passive park so you can do the things with your families, have cookouts, have everything. And I think that should be the most important thing right now. And I think we should have a time limit for having the park actually open to the public.
Okay. Any other discussion before we vote? Andrew?
Quick question. Do we actually need to vote on this? It just sounds to me like we're just asking them to come back with more information and then we'll vote. I could be wrong.
I don't think you do, but Mr. Bell?
Board members, there does need to be a vote because right now staff does need to be directed to do something. So at the moment, you all are just debating topics and without some action directed towards staff, they have nothing to go back and do.
Okay. So the motion directs it. All right. Is everyone prepared to vote? We'll call the question. All right. All those in favor say aye. 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 Opposed? Ayes have it, unanimously approved. So next step, y'all will draft very specifics in a form of a draft amendment, and that'll come back and we will address that in September.
And you can take up the other grant agreement issue
At
at
the
that
time.
time as well.
Yes, okay. Anything else on that before we move on to the 5-year review topic? Program update.
Vice Chair, if you would, I would recommend giving a chance for everybody that's
little
been
bio
here
break?
for the Jefferson track discussion to move on out if they like.
Please do that, and if anybody needs a quick break. Ray, coming.
Set aside 2 hours for these meetings. I have a lunch meeting at noon, and
Given that,
there may be some others too.
I know, and I know that you have, Charlie. Do you want to defer the rest of this to the September meeting? Because we're starting to lose our.
We have to have a quorum, so.
Happen. So.
Could just give one quick update on the population changes because that
Okay, I think
changes
they
the
need to know
funding
that.
availability.
Why don't we do that when?
I'd hate to wait 3 months for that since we have a grant cycle coming up.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Thank you. Good job.
So, Eric, can we just go ahead and do that without the break as
Sure.
if people are
Yep.
leaving? Because I think we need to give respect to everybody's.
Get into that right now.
Okay. Thank y'all.
So you'll recall Ms. Farrell asked about updating the population figures based on the 2020 census, and our master plan, or the Greenbelt Comprehensive Master Plan, does address that. It says the funding allocation to each municipality and unincorporated area will be reviewed and updated as necessary based on the decennial U.S. Census. So we've taken the new census and developed come up with the population numbers for each municipality and the unincorporated county within the urban growth boundary. And you can see on the far right column the change in percentage difference that each municipality has within the urban growth boundary between the 2010 and 2020 census. So looks like Charleston loses the biggest population percentage and Mount Pleasant gains the largest percentage. And how that impacts us is right now, at the last meeting, the second column shows the available balance, which was based on the 2010 census. And the next column shows what the available balance would be based on the 2020 census. And that really the only change, that difference, is due to the FY23 allocation. The new population figures were used for FY23 forward, so it didn't impact anything in the past behind FY23 because those have already been allocated. We can't change those. And then for the lifetime difference, which is, as you know, is a projection, Charleston loses a little over $2 million for the lifetime balance of funding remaining. And Mount Pleasant, again, is the largest beneficiary of the population shift and gaining about 3.3 million. So I just did want to make everybody aware of that, since you had gotten different information last meeting based on the 2010 census.
Okay. Any questions about that? So there's nothing we can do about this. It's just a fact and a formula we have to apply.
That's correct. And we worked with the COG as well as our GIS department because there's not a 2020 census line of data that breaks it out in the urban growth boundary. But they had a process they went through and bounced their data back and forth, and we feel very confident in the numbers.
Okay, great. All right, that's great. Then our next meeting is scheduled to be September the 14th, and we will just defer these items on the agenda that we aren't getting to today. We'll put that on the September 14th agenda, and no meeting in July or August. Is there a motion to adjourn? All right, second. All in favor of adjournment? Aye. All opposed? We're adjourned. Thank you.
Man.